Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video 174, the role of the internet in spreading occultism. This actually ties in with my spiritual development, to an extent. I'd had an interest in the occult when I was younger anyway, I'm not exactly sure how I had even really encountered anything occult since I was raised in a nominally Christian family that didn't even, for most of my young childhood, we didn't even have cable, so not exactly getting familiarized with Wicca or anything. But here's the thing. Later on, my interest gets piqued again on the internet. Literally, I can't remember the exact site, but it was one of the early websites I think it was built in the late 90s, pretty primitive. It had esoteric works on it, and of course I was reading, like the Clavicles of Solomon and some of the Steganographia and some of these works. I literally printed large amounts of this sort of cult material out at the school library. I'm not sure that I was supposed to be printing that many pages. Like the librarian that was there until I was in 11th grade didn't care. But then she was replaced by a crazy lady who actually, she really hated me for some reason. Like one time I was just looking at cartoons, she banned me from the library for a week or some crazy shit. And she used to yell at people it's like you're a librarian, you're supposed to be quiet. You're supposed to tell other people to be quiet too. Instead, you're fucking getting into a shouting match with some freshman or something. It was crazy. But yes, the internet has been key in my own development by creating an access to texts. Of course, I'm not able to access in physical form every text that I work with. I have a collection. Certainly I can get more within my collection, but some of them it's cost prohibitive. It's a rare book, even if it's not necessarily particularly valuable. It's like Homan's Powwows. You try getting a physical copy of Powwows. But you can find scans of it that are out of copyright. They've been transcribed or something. I prefer to transcribe myself. It's actually a little bit easier to do that part of the process myself. I prefer to work with an image scan of a PDF image scan of a document. Now, I like reading physical books, but for editing purposes, it's invaluable because those texts have been made available on the literary side of occultism. The majority of these works would never have become available if not for the internet. You have, I can't remember the name of it, in the Netherlands, I believe, there's a university or a library collection there of occult works. And they've actually begun to compile them online. People can now translate and transcribe and stuff from the images that they're putting on, for the world to see. And it's very interesting. That's the other thing. It goes beyond literature as well. As far as my occult video series, I obviously wouldn't be talking about the occult to thousands of people here if it weren't for the internet. It makes it far more easy. Before the internet, you would have been relegated to maybe if you're really witchy and you're willing to be kind of put on a show for people, like you're willing to bring on your black cat and have a cauldron in it with a fog machine and stuff. If you're willing to do that, you get a cable access show, get a slot there. Maybe you could go on the radio and be like, my name is Minerva, and today we will be talking about tarot cards. You can do something like that, but it'd be showmanship. Whereas now you don't need that. You can be more traditional. You don't need to put on a show for people. You don't need to sensationalize because you can simply put the info out there. Anyone in the world can search for it. Before it's more limited. It's more local. In cable, more censored in many cases. You wouldn't be doing a sex magic panel, presumably, on 90s era cable. You could run afoul of the FCC and get a considerable fine. Radio, same thing. And of course, with satellite radio, they're going to be picky and choosy on who comes aboard. They probably want the showman psychic too, because it's going to be more popular potentially, at least with that kind of audience. And before that, before the electronic age of communication, it's even harder to spread. Smaller religious or spiritual orders had difficulty with spreading in many cases. Now, of course, Wicca, when it first emerges in the TV generation, is relatively small. It's also combated during the Satanic Panic by claims that it has something to do with Satanism, which I think most Satanists have a good laugh at. I think most Wiccans have a good laugh at it too, but Wicca is considerably larger now than it was a decade ago. And part of that is because Wiccans are capable of spreading their material. The books are available online. Wiccans themselves can defend themselves against, false charges from the church or some politician. Atheism has done the same thing, to an extent, though. To an extent. Soft atheism is quite common. Irreligion is quite common. Hard atheism appears to be shrinking at the moment. I'm not surprised, by the way, that a bunch of hard atheists are like, fuck it, because I think they see that a lot of self-proclaimed atheists within the political arena bend over backwards for organized religion so long as it isn't Christianity, in which case it's kind of pointless to be part of that activism of hardline atheism in many cases. The occult, meanwhile, will always stand against such nonsense, always stand against the abuses of crazy religions. Because standardized, organized religion in the right-hand path, since I see that as a negative thing myself, something to be fought against. Spirituality's fine. If you're a theist, that's fine. But the occult is spreading. It's growing quickly. Part of that is that those of us that practice the occult in some sense or another are able to spread material. I'm able to spread books. Some of the books that I've edited are not elsewhere available, at least in a paperback version. There, I mean, you can get a scan of it, or there's a PDF somewhere someone transcribed 20 years ago. But other than that, nothing was available. In some cases, I think a few of the fortune-telling texts that I've offered, it's the first time that they've been actually released as a proper edition in the modern period at all. That, I think it's a labor of love in some cases. Maybe I sell 2 copies in the whole year of some of these works, but it's worth it. It's worth it for knowledge, and that pursuit of knowledge was sort of what gets me off on the literary end. I'm a bibliophile too, I will admit. Smell of old books is great. And the occult is growing, it might even be exponentially. A lot of people, I think, are branching back out into paganism and esotericism as an alternative to globalized or increasingly globalistic religious groups that have sort of abandoned Western civilization. It seems Christianity increasingly is abandoning it. And certainly there are other religions that are present that never were sort of part of that core anyway. But the concept of enlightening and improving culture, trying to strive for something better, has been lost in a tidal wave of nihilism, it seems. I oppose this. I think it's possible to improve humanity. So yeah, it's a little bit about the occult as it relates to the internet. I do cover that briefly in Fruits of Eden, which, by the way, I still have to go back and re-edit. I want to re-illustrate, tidy that up, change the format a little. It's good, but I'd like it to be even better. The font needs to be back in 11 point. I use a different standard now, different font. So some things have to be changed. That's about all. Peace out.